Russ Galvin, Colorado Crane Operator School. I want to get away and continue that series of roles and responsibilities of around the lifting operations. And right now I want to discuss the roles and responsibility of the lift director. So I think most people don't, first off, want to talk about the idea or what a lift director is. And in essence, they are an individual that is in charge of the entire lifting operation. It doesn't necessarily have to be a separate individual, that's not already on site, but it is a designated title that needs to be assigned to during hoisting operations. But it is the individual that is in charge of all hoisting operations, meaning they have the right to shut down the hoisting operations at any given point in time, especially if any unsafe conditions are starting to become present. So that's one of the very first things about the lift director that I want to, bring up, make you aware of. The second thing too is that they have to be on the job site at all times. So it just can't necessarily be, let's just say a project manager or an owner that's, in the office doing their duties, but it has to be an individual that is present at the job site at all times during hoisting operations. So once we kind of got that covered, one of the primary roles that lift director is to handle, I should say, is going to be making sure the operator is actually certified and qualified to run that crane. So once again, as you maybe have learned in other series, a certified operator does not necessarily make them qualified to run that particular piece of equipment. And so just a small quick recap is each operator needs to have an evaluation performed by a qualified individual, whether it be a third party such as ourselves or someone within their company, but it's through that particular company that they are qualified to run that particular piece of equipment, or I should say crane type. So once again, that's one of the primary roles that they want to make sure they get started, ensure that operator is certified and qualified. It is also their duty to let that operator know of any known weight of of whatever they're hoisting. So it's not a matter of guessing, asking the operator, hey, how much you got? It should be the other way around, where that lift director is informing the operator, say, hey, this load weighs 10,000 pounds. So that way that operator can take that information, and once it goes and reads on that LMI and they're actually starting to read, 12, 13, 14,000 pounds, a significant difference, that way they're able to communicate back with the operator, back with the lift director and the rigger to ensure that, hey, how did you get this information? Because I'm reading something completely different. But then again, also verify that all the lifting straps, the slings, etc., is the appropriate working load limits. And with that also being said, not only do you need to know that weight, but also need to inform that operator to say, hey, you're going to be swinging over here, say to your right, at, around here by the dumpster or whatever it may be, and it's a radius about 120 feet from the crane. So like I said, just certain different characteristics, but it is definitely the lift director's job to give the weight and the radius for that particular weight to the crane operator. It also need to have an understanding of soil conditions and how those soil conditions can affect safe operations of the crane. So a lot of the information should be given to the operator, the lift director, prior to arriving on site by the site supervisor. But once again, it is still the lift director's job to communicate back and forth with the operator, understand the soil types, conditions, and how that can affect the hoisting operations. The same rules when it comes to the power lines, understand the power lines and the respective distances that they maintain, that is part of, respective to the kilovolts. That's where I was looking for, that's on those power lines. And it is also their job to designate a rigger and a signal person for the hoisting operation. And when you designate that signal person and designate that rigger, that they do need to be qualified. Whether they're qualified through a third party or they qualified in-house, but they have to be a qualified individual during the hoisting operation. They also need to ensure that all personnel, with that being said, all personnel involved in the hoisting operation understands all their duties and associated hazards for the entire process. Also need to know that, ensure that rigger is not only knowledgeable and qualified, but ensure that the load itself is appropriately rigged, so there's no displacement, no load shift, and of course use appropriate size rigging for the job. And with that being said, that is typically ensured by completing a lift plan, and lift plans can be complex, and they can be very basic, and that's we go over all of that in our lift director class, but it is up to the lift director's job to make sure that that lift plan is being followed and completed. And with that also being said, there has to be some sort of emergency action plan in place in the event of something that does go wrong, and make sure everyone understands all the appropriate action plans necessary during the lifting operations. It is also the lift director's job to understand the inspection records for the crane, make sure that they're actually up to date as well. And once again, this goes back to a strong communication going back and forth with the operator, making sure that they're completing the due diligence, and the owner and the user of the crane, respective of what's going on, making sure all the inspection records are up to date. And then it is also to ensure that the operator handles that load in a smooth and controlled operation. You definitely don't want to be having an operator in the seat of that crane that's going to be, having a lot of excessive drift or causing a lot of shock loading onto that crane, which can have, cause, disastrous results, for lack of better terms. And so you really want to make sure that operators is not only qualified, and certified, but they also be able to handle that machine and maintain smooth control operations. So like I said, this is just a few responsibilities that lift director needs to maintain. But in essence, that lift director is in charge of all hoisting operations. So they carry a lot of weight on their shoulders, and that lift director needs to be assigned, or that designated title needs to be assigned before those lifting operations take place. So once again, this is Russ Galvin, Colorado Crane Operator School. Thank you and have a great day.